Welcome to Dirk Hartog Island. Right now I am the most westerly person in Western Australia. I'm standing on the west coast of Dirk Hartog Island and there is no one else further west of me. Absolutely incredible.
Western Australia is defined by distance. It covers a third of the Australian continent, yet its edges are rarely visited, even by those who live here. To understand the scale of this place, I travelled to its furthest western point, a place named Dirk Hartog Island, where red deserts finally give way to the Indian Ocean. This remote island sits at the mouth of Shark Bay. Nearly 850 kilometres north of Perth, it's only accessible by boat and four-wheel drive vehicles. It's both a geographical limit and a historical starting point, because in the year 1616, the Dutch captain Dirk Hartog arrived here by accident, leaving behind the first recorded evidence of a European landing in Australia. For tens of thousands of years before this, the indigenous Malgana people had called Shark Bay home, but Dirk Hartog's arrival signalled a seismic shift in Australian history. Although the Dutch presence was brief, these European explorers paved the way for Britain's colonisation of Western Australia, a brutal process which largely displaced the indigenous people. Standing at the western edge of Western Australia today means confronting both the scale of the land and the consequences of these early encounters. Under British colonisation, Dirk Hartog Island was repurposed for sheep grazing, and much of its native wildlife was pushed to the brink of extinction. Recently, however, the damage has begun to be addressed through an innovative rewilding project aiming to restore the island's ecological balance to how it was in 1616, the year when Dirk Hartog arrived. This is the story of my journey to Wirrawana, to Dirk Hartog Island, the most westerly point in Western Australia.
We landed in Perth yesterday morning, and we spent the day kitting up, basically getting our kit for the camping trip and picking up our hire car, and then we drove about 2 hours north of Perth to this beautiful little seaside town. This is Jurien Bay, and there's not much here. There's just a few campsites, there's a couple of hotels, motels and one pub, but this is pretty much the start of our journey north along Western Australia's western coast. Our first mission of the trip is to head to a place called Dirk Hartog Island. It's about 6.5 hours driving from here, plus a boat trip. Because you guys know how much I love a geographical and geopolitical anomaly. Now, tomorrow is also my birthday, so I'm taking the opportunity to celebrate my 35th year on the planet by visiting the most westerly location in Western Australia. From here we're going to head up north to a place called Geraldton, that's about 2.5 hours, and then we're going to head even further north to a place called Shark Bay, where we're going to spend the night before heading out to Dirk Hartog Island. This will be the first in a series of videos I'll be bringing you from Western Australia. We're also heading further north up to a place called Exmouth, and then Karratha and Karijini. So we'll be bringing you a lot more stories from the road. I'll be joined on these road trip videos by Claire's Footsteps, who is very excited to be in Australia. Woo. Or I should say back in Australia. So this isn't actually the first time either of us have been here. We were both here about 8 years ago, before we actually knew each other. Together. This little car, this Suzuki Swift, this has got to get us several thousand kilometres. We're doing 650 kilometres just today. 7 or 8 hours of driving with all the stops. So yeah, this has got to get us around Western Australia, to the north and then to the south. So let's hope it does the job.
As we followed the dusty Indian Ocean drive onwards towards Geraldton, the landscape's emptied. Western Australia is one of the most sparsely populated places of its size anywhere in the world. The state covers more than 2.6 million square kilometres, yet its population numbers only about 3 million people, with 75% of them living in Perth's greater metropolitan area. With a population of around 40,000, the port city of Geraldton is the largest city north of the state capital, so we took the chance to load up on supplies after 2 hours of driving before we entered even sparser territory on our way north towards Shark Bay. On WA's lonely roads, petrol stations are few and far between, and after another 2 hours on the highway, we welcomed a quick stop in a classic Australian roadhouse, 250 kilometres to the north of Geraldton.
Here we are, Billabong Roadhouse. We are another 200 kilometres, 2 hours of driving down, and we've just stopped at the Billabong Roadhouse. So this is one of Australia's many sort of servos, they call them, service stations, roadhouses, and these are basically remote remote service stations, remote shops, remote hotels, motels. You can stay here, you can camp here, you can eat here, you can fuel up here. You can get, I think you can get your beer here as well if you want cold beers. And they have these sort of spread out, strung out along the main roads. And when you're getting further north, they get more and more distant. So you end up sort of stopping at whichever one you find to fill up on petrol, really. Here it's less remote. So from Billabong, it's only 50k to the next roadhouse. And interestingly, I used to work at the next one. It's called Overlander Roadhouse. And I won't show you on this video because we're not going to stop today because we're in a rush now. We're going to stop on the way back out of Monkey Mia. So I'll show you guys in the next video as we work our way further north where I used to work. There you go, free toilets, gluten-free food, real coffee, overnight rooms, air conditioned, and gifts and souvenirs. Cool, so let's take a look inside the roadhouse. You know, plenty of spare tyres in case you break down, I guess. Huh?
They've got oat, you can get an oat cappuccino here.
Yeah, loving the soundtrack as well. Let's take a look. Yeah, whatever you need. Pretty much whatever you need, you can get it. Water bottles, drinks. In case you left your whoopee cushion behind. If you left your whoopee cushion in Perth, you can get one here. For your oils and lubricants. Yeah, established in 1962 apparently. Extensive list of burgers. Plenty of nostalgia on the walls as well. Yeah, almost anything you need you can get here. Anyway, we've got to hit the road, so we're going to head up to the Shark Bay Peninsula now. So right now we've entered the Shark Bay World Heritage Area. So you can kind of see on this map where we're heading. So Shark Bay is this kind of collection of islands in this peninsula. And then the Overlander Roadhouse at the junction there, that's where I used to work. And we're going to follow the road here past Shell Beach, Nanga, Denham, and then we're spending the night at Monkey Mia. And then tomorrow morning, we'll be heading to Dirk Hartog Island. And that's this big one here, the most westerly island you can see there in Western Australia. Okay, so we've just made our first turn in, well, since leaving Geraldton. I think it's a couple of 100 kilometres on just the straight road. But now we turned left at the Overlander Roadhouse. And we're now officially on the Shark Bay Peninsula. We've just seen a sign saying that the traditional owners or custodians, I'm not 100% sure of the term, that own this land or look after this land are the Malgana people. So they are the indigenous group that have lived here for presumably tens of thousands of years. And they were the people that were then displaced by the Europeans who arrived with Dirk Hartog was the first of them. 7 hours of driving down. We have made it to Shark Bay. So we're here at Monkey Mia. This is where we'll spend the night. And tomorrow we'll be setting foot on the most westerly island. And I'm super excited.
We spent the night in Monkey Mia, a campsite and resort overlooking the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Shark Bay, before driving to the small town of Denham in the morning to catch our boat across to Dirk Hartog Island. The name Shark Bay was given to the area by an English seafarer and pirate named William Dampier, who arrived in 1699, several decades after Dirk Hartog left a pewter plaque on the island that now bears his name, although we associate the British exploration of Australia with Captain Cook. A century before he visited Australia's east coast, William Dampier charted much of Western Australia's coastline. He named Shark Bay after the abundance of sharks they found in the shallow reefs, ignoring, of course, the Malgana name Gufaguda, which means the place of two waters. During the British colonial era, Shark Bay became a centre for pearling, fishing and sheep farming. In 1991, its unique geology and biodiversity saw Shark Bay recognised as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but it wasn't until 2018 that the Malgana were officially recognised as the region's traditional custodians and regranted native titles back over their land.
Right, we think we found our boat. Island Life Adventures. Yeah, I think this is the one.
This is the one.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. It's going to be a bumpy one. 45 minutes to Dirk Hartog Island.
Although the sun was shining, as soon as we left the shallow safety of Denham's Harbour behind, we were hit by fierce winds and soaked to the bone by sea spray. Even in 21st century Australia, this is a difficult crossing to make. Because of its inaccessibility, Malgana never permanently settled Dirk Hartog Island, and are thought to have used it for temporary hunting and fishing grounds, or even as a place of exile. British colonisers introduced sheep and other non-native wildlife in the 19th century, destroying the endemic flora and fauna on the island in the process. In 1963, Sir Thomas Wardle, former mayor of Perth, purchased a pastoral lease. The island is still leased by his grandchildren. Rather than continuing to graze sheep, however, the family turned the island over to ecotourism and conservation. Visitor numbers are limited, and when you arrive on the eastern shore by boat, you're greeted with the welcome sight of a rustic bar and cafe, a few holiday chalets, the remains of the sheep ranch, and a wilderness stretching westwards towards the Indian Ocean.
We made it. We're now on Dirk Hartog Island. So it was a windy, blustery ride over. So we had to take the little tender across to almost to the beach itself, but not quite. And then you walk across the last sort of 30-40 meters to get onto the island itself. It's surrounded by shallow sandbanks. This is the sort of rustic beach cafe they've got. Yeah, it's beautiful. There's not really much here apart from this little hotel and cafe, so we should have this whole island to ourselves for the rest of the day. So cheers. Iced coffee with a fantastic view. They've got the history of the island here as well. Now, when we landed, we were given a quick history tour. European history, of course. Now, the indigenous people call this Wirramuna, which you can see there, Wirrawuna, or Dirk Hartog Island. Now, Dirk Hartog was the Dutch guy. He landed here in 1616 and was the first European to set foot on Western Australian soil. Dirk Hartog didn't stay around for long, but he left a pewter plaque here, which was later found by Fleming, who was another Dutch guy who'd showed up a couple of years later, a couple of decades later. On his explorations, and the plaque ended up back in Holland. Now, William Dampier was the first Englishman to come here, and then following him a load of French people came here, and interestingly in 1772 a French explorer tried to claim Western Australia for the French. He didn't realise that Captain Cook had got to the east coast 2 years before, I think, or a year before. They narrowly missed out on this whole region being a French colony, I suppose. Everyone could have been speaking French instead of English.
The island's history is fascinating, but we still had our mission to complete. There are no paved roads on Dirk Hartog Island, so the only way to reach the western shore is by joining a 4x4 tour with the local guides from the eco-resort. As we crossed sparse sandy landscapes, we were now tantalisingly close to reaching the most westerly point in Western Australia.
Alright, so we're now on the west coast of Dirk Hartog Island. I don't know if we're at the most westerly point, but from here, I'll spin you around. You can see the WA mainland way back there, and that's Steep Point, and that's the most westerly point on mainland Western Australia. And that used to be connected to this island before the last ice age. Rising sea levels separated this island across the channel from the mainland. So yeah, technically this is the most westerly island in Western Australia, but Steep Point is the most westerly point on the mainland. But yeah, of course, we're further west. So these are the blowholes. There's holes in the rocks and the water basically is forced through them, so it looks like the blowhole of a whale. So yeah, the only way to get here, unless you have your own boat, is on a day tour basically. So with quite a few other people, there's about 20 or 30 people came on the tour. But when you get here, they split you up into sort of individual car groups of 5 or 6, so it's a lot smaller, a lot more manageable. But we're pretty much, apart from there's a couple of people that live here, work here, there's 3 people. There's one family that own the sort of holding here, where the cafe is that we landed at, and the hotel. Apart from that, this is all a national park. It's all just, no one else lives here outside of that area. So yeah, it's just empty, remote. It's beautiful though, absolutely beautiful. So we are currently the most westerly people. I think so. Yeah, so Claire is the most westerly person. Well no, I'm actually further west than you. Yeah.
Oh, what, that's west.
Yeah, which way is west? So right now, I am the most westerly person in Western Australia. There is no one else further west of me. Absolutely incredible. This is probably the best birthday ever. So now I'm not the most westerly person. Claire is the most westerly person in Western Australia. But this is the west coast of Dirk Hartog Island. And yeah, there's like no one else around apart from our group who are all further east of us right now. So yeah, we are the most westerly people in Australia at the moment. Yeah, this place is incredible. It's like lunar landscapes. Like it's basically just one big desert island. And I'll tell you a bit more about the rewilding project when we get back to the sort of base camp where we landed on the boat. But yeah, they're trying to basically bring all this area here back to how it used to be before Europeans arrived in 1616.
We'd completed our mission. We had become the most westerly people in Western Australia. Before we headed back for a well-earned birthday drink at the bar though, we also explored the remote southern coast of Dirk Hartog Island, where we discovered exactly why this area was given the name Shark Bay.
So Dirk Hartog Island is part of the wider Shark Bay UNESCO World Heritage Area, and it was called Shark Bay by an Englishman named William Dampier, who before he became an explorer was a pirate. So he came to Dirk Hartog Island in the late 17th century, I think around 1699, after the Dutch had arrived here. And he explored much of Western Australia. There's lots of places named after him, or that he named. He was a great cartographer. And yeah, he mapped out much of the western coast of Australia. And then, of course, that was taken advantage of by the British, who later colonised the entire region, or the entire continent. Now, the area had an indigenous name before he arrived, of course. This island, for example, was called Wirramuna. And we were told by our guide that it was probably uninhabited, but there are records showing that the local people would occasionally exile some unwanted members of the community here. But when William Dampier turned up, they didn't use the Aboriginal name, of course, but they named it Shark Bay because whenever they went fishing, they caught these small sharks, which tended to kind of stay in the shallow areas. And we've come to this little bay because apparently you could see them. Oh wow, and actually you can. I wasn't sure if they were just saying that. I'm not sure if this will capture on camera, but just here, right next to the beach, there are about 7 or 8 fins. So just down in the water, you can see all these little sharks. There's all these fins just popping up. And these aren't your big white sharks or anything like that. These are just little nurse sharks or reef sharks, very small sharks. Amazing there. I was just told they're nervous whalers. That's the name of the shark. And they're related to bronze whalers, which apparently are a much larger shark, but these are tiny. But they have huge colonies of them just living off the coast for around this time of year anyway, in the springtime. And they kind of know where to find them because they'll be hanging out in the shallows. But yeah, these sharks, these are the ones that William Dampier got annoyed about catching too many of them in his nets when they were stocking up here on food and supplies for their journey around Australia. Yeah, you can see it's because it's the most westerly isle. And the largest island in Western Australia. A lot of the early European explorers, if you still call them that, would have sort of just bumped into this as they came around the coast and came across the Indian Ocean, which is why so many different sailors landed here. The Dutch, French, and the British before it was then colonised. And most of them came looking for supplies, only to find that this was really just a desert island. There wasn't much here to catch. There wasn't much to fish apart from these sharks, apparently, and there wasn't much fresh water either. So yeah, they just kind of carried on up the coast again. And it wasn't until much later in the Victorian era, when the sheep shearing stations were established here, that it kind of became permanently settled. We've just been told to watch out for snakes. One of the guides said it very casually. They said there's been sightings of Australia's most venomous snake, the western brown, amongst these rocks. There's been sightings in the last couple of weeks. So yeah, there's a lot of people barefoot as well. But that's Australia for you. Look out for snakes. It's not the snakes, it's the spiders. It's not the spiders, it's the sharks. So, yeah, it's a beautiful place, but you can feel the inhospitability. You can imagine Dirk Hartog turning up here in the early 1600s and seeing the venomous snakes and the lack of water and the desert-like landscapes and perhaps not being as awed by it as we are, but being humbled.
But there's more to Dirk Hartog Island than its history and geographical extremity. The island is also the focus of a successful pioneering conservation project on the very western edge of Australia. Before we headed back to the mainland, we learned more about the 1616 rewilding project at the eco resort.
So when you arrive on the island, they do have this cafe here and bar, the inscription bar, and that's where you're sort of welcomed in. But then this is the homestead. So this is all land owned by a family who gave up the rest of the area as a national park. This homestead is still private land, but the rest of the island is effectively a national park where you've got the 1616 rewilding project going on. What they've done is the family that own it now, they cleared out all of the sort of feral animals that had lived here for well over a century. So feral cats, dogs, all that kind of stuff. Basically animals that weren't native to Dirk Hartog Island. With the help of a government program, they've rewilded the entire island. So none of these pest species exist anymore, and instead they're slowly reintroducing the native species, including wallabies and other animals, to basically bring it back to how it was to the pre-European. It wasn't until the 19th century that the shearing sheds behind me were built. One of the original ones is over there, I'll show you it in a second, and they basically turned this whole island to a sheep farming station. And they used to just load the wool directly onto ships at the jetty. So there was this jetty just here past these sea kayaks and paddle boards. This small jetty down there. But it was the sheep shearing business that took over the island that just ruined the ecosystem here. Just all the endemic species, the indigenous species went extinct. And it was, just introduced European animals that ruled the roost here. So the 1616 rewilding project is basically just undoing the damage that was done by the sheep shearing industry. Wow, so this is not one of the original shearing sheds. This is just a kind of mock-up replica or restored shearing shed of the many that would have been here in the Victorian era in the 1800s. And they've turned it into a cool kind of social space where if you're staying on the island, you can just hang out, play darts, play table tennis. And of course, there's a bar. And they make their own gin here as well, so we're about to have a gin tasting. And I imagine if Dirk Hartog or William Dampier had turned up in the 17th century and found there was a gin distillery here, they may have stayed for a little bit longer. And just round the corner, this is the original shearing set. So I was told this dates to the late 19th century. It's all in original condition. So yeah, this is the inside of the old shearing shed. They've turned it into a little museum on the island. It's just quite cool. All the old tools, everything. But you cannot imagine working in here in 1890 or whatever, in the searing heat, shearing sheep all day, and then loading the wool onto a ship. Ridiculous. It was this European endeavour, this business venture, that basically destroyed the ecosystem and the wildlife, and that now means that the entire island, Dirk Hartog Island, needs to be rewilded, as do a lot of places in Australia that were basically destroyed by the introduction of invasive species. Oh, you step out and you're instantly hit by the wind and the heat. This would have been a formidable place to live in the 19th century. I do not envy them. Luckily now it's a bit nicer. There's a nice little lodge here, and you can explore in an air-conditioned 4x4. It's a lot easier. This is what you have to do if you get bit by a snake.
Yeah, so you have to do like first aid, snake bite kit, broad bandage, and sort of immobilise it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you have to call shark bay aviation, and go from the airstrip to Monkey Mire Airport.
Oh,
so you have to get back to the mainland first, and then you have to arrange with the flying doctors to meet you at Monkey Mire Airport. So then I guess they'll hopefully bring the antivenom straight there and administer the antivenom. Then you might still have to fly from Monkey Mire to another hospital.
Yeah.
Like you may well then have to fly to Geraldton or Carnarvon.
Or Perth even.
Even Perth, yeah.
That's something to Perth if they're flying in.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So try not to get bitten. We need to try not to get bitten by a
Try not to
snake.
get bitten by a snake.
Put a scupper in our plans, wouldn't it?
Over here is a bit more history. You can see the names of all the major Europeans who were involved in the sort of development of the island from the Victorian era. So the first was von Bieber, and then these are all the sort of sheep shearers right up until the current family that still own it are the Wardles. And the Wardles are the ones who sort of came to an agreement where much of the land was given back to the government and to the Indigenous community, turned into a national park. All right, so the last event on this tour from Denham to Dirk Hartog Island is the gin tasting. So let's do it.
Burning your nostril hairs more like it, and down the hatch. Always sip at it, whatever you want to do. If there is a little bit of tonic here, so you don't need to make yourself a full drink, but if you add a tiny little dash of tonic to it, it will just enhance those flavors.
Okay, so the gin has been consumed. And that means it is mission complete from Dirk Hartog Island. We set off about 36 hours ago from Jurien Bay, heading north to Dirk Hartog Island to find the most westerly point in Western Australia. We found this incredibly remote, scenic and simply beautiful island with a really fascinating history and a really interesting rewilding program going on as well. But most importantly, we completed the mission. We became the most westerly people in Western Australia. For me, there's probably not a better way to spend my birthday than on the westernmost point of Western Australia. So that's it from this video. Mission accomplished. But join us next time because we'll be continuing this Western Australia series as we head from Shark Bay north towards Exmouth.